Here we have Lesson 31 entitled Manifest Destiny. So our teach that we can explain that manifest destiny is a result of people's political, social, and economic views, that we can analyze how manifest destiny related to westward expansion, and finally that we can identify all the areas that were added to form the United States. So let's take a look at this painting here. By the way, the name of this painting is American Progress, and it was painted in 1872. Now, obviously, the most prominent feature in this picture is this woman here, and her name is Columbia. And she looks sort of like an angel there, right? But she is actually a physical representation of the United States. And we see her in other places, such as she is Lady Liberty on the Statue of Liberty. We also see her in a number of pictures and a number of paintings. And she is the symbol for the movie company Columbia Pictures. But again, she's a physical representation of the United States and all its beliefs and hopes for the future. So here we see her in the middle of the painting, but let's look at what's going on around her. First of all, we see what looks like a train moving this direction here. We see other trains here. We see telegraph lines here, electric lines, and look who's carrying them. So Columbia is carrying this wire in helping to string these telegraph lines here. We see she's also holding a book. And let's see what else. We see looks like a stagecoach moving this way. Here's a covered wagon heading here, a man on horseback. Looks like a farmer down here plowing some land. We see these men here carrying pickaxes and shovels, most likely miners. And let's see, what else do we see? Right here. We see these people now. Who do you think these folks are? And they look to be looking over their shoulder. And whereas these folks are kind of marching this way, these folks seem to be more like they're running away. So who do you think these might represent? Up here we see some animals. They look like buffalo, also running in this direction. And if we look at the picture, it's kind of hard to tell, but if you look at the background here, we see this looks like a city. And here we see steamboats and a big river here. And this right here, we also see a bit of a lighthouse. So this actually represents America's Atlantic coast. As we move forward here, we also see water this way. So this represents America's Pacific coast. So what we see in this picture is a representation of America coast to coast, Atlantic all the way to the Pacific. If we also look at the background, let's see what's going on behind it. We see that it's very sunny and bright and lighted. In front of Columbia, what do we see? Storm clouds, very dark and stormy. But as she's moving, what seems to be happening to these storm clouds? And also, which direction, if this is the East Coast, which direction are all of these people and which direction is Columbia moving? All right, so what do you think is being represented in this picture? By everybody moving in this direction, showing these people running away, these animals running away, and moving from light to dark. So let's think about that and discuss that for a little bit. So let's take a moment to define this term manifest destiny. First of all, the word manifest is an adjective, and this means something that's clear or easily seen. Another word for manifest is obvious. Then destiny, which is a noun, and this is an outcome that is meant to happen. Sometimes destiny is also called fate, or an older term for it is providence. You might see that in some primary sources you might look at, this idea of providence. So we put that together, manifest destiny, and we get a fate or an outcome that is meant to happen, that is very obvious. Everybody can see it. So this term manifest destiny is first used by newspaper editor John O'Sullivan, in which he describes his belief that America is chosen by God to spread from its origins on the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific Ocean. So, the idea of not just America wanting to expand for its own purposes, but is actually chosen by God, and this is a God-given destiny for the United States. Now, this idea of manifest destiny, which, by the way, caught on in America during this time, is based on the nationalism that we saw following the War of 1812. And we talked about that in the era of good feelings, how America was very proud and very confident in its growth and its potential. And they believed that America was not just a good and prosperous nation, but was actually a superior nation to those of the past, superior to the nations of Europe, and superior to those that they shared the continent of North America with, such as Mexico to the west and Canada to the north. Now there's also a social element to manifest destiny too, and that was the belief that America's culture, its values, and its religion, especially Christianity, should also be spread to the west. the political goals, and this is the spread of democracy. And remember, we talked about how democracy was expanded through expanded suffrage in the early 1800s. The common man, regular folks, were now allowed to vote. So they wanted to see that democracy spread to the West. And it had its strongest support in the Democratic Party, which again was supported by Southerners and Westerners who wanted to see their lands expand to the West. There's also an economic rationale, and that is to gain the land and natural resources to feed America's industrial economy and also the growing, the growing cotton crops in the South and the growing farmland. So this idea of gaining these natural resources to feed our growing population and economy. And they believed, we mentioned that they believed that America was superior, and this meant that the natives and Mexico, which were currently occupying the lands to the west, were wasting those lands and not using them to their potential, and that therefore they must be pushed aside for the sake of American progress. So let's take a moment to look at how the United States was put together from the years of 1876 to 1853. Now obviously this does not include Alaska and Hawaii, which were acquired much later, but this is what is also called the Lower 48. The continental U.S. So we start, of course, with the original 13 states in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence. By winning the Revolutionary War, the Treaty of Paris added this land all the way to the Mississippi River. The next major acquisition is, of course, the Louisiana Purchase from France in 1803. Then we have the northern border set by treaty with Britain in 1818. This sets our U.S.-Canadian border at 49 degrees latitude, or also called the 49th parallel. Next comes the Adams-Onís Treaty and the annexation of Florida from Spain. Then we get the Texas annexation of 1845, and if you remember from your Texas history last year, that Texas fought for its independence from Mexico and was briefly an independent republic before being annexed by the United States, and that this created a disputed territory between Mexico and the United States, which both countries claimed this land down to the Rio Grande. The next major addition is the Oregon Territory in 1846. You may remember in elementary school playing the game Oregon Trail, perhaps. But the U.S. adds the Oregon Territory in a treaty with Great Britain. And then we have the Mexican Cession, which is added along with the disputed territory, with the U.S.-Mexican War. And finally, we have the Gadsden Purchase, which was bought from Mexico in 1853. So if we look at this, we realize that the United States has grown both by peaceful treaties, such as the Louisiana Purchase, the 49th parallel, the Adams-Onís Treaty, and the Oregon Territory, and the Gadsden Purchase, and also expanded through war, such as the Treaty of Paris in the Revolutionary War, and the U.S.-Mexican War, adding the Mexican Cession and the disputed territory. So both by war and peace, the United States has grown from its origins on the coast. Remember, we started here with this little old Jamestown and expanded all the way here to the Pacific Ocean, coast to coast, so manifest destiny is realized. So our Lesson 31 thoughts, that how do you think the events and changes we learned about in Unit 6, such as the era of good feelings, industrialization, and urbanization, how would these have contributed to the idea of manifest destiny? What arguments would others have against manifest destiny, and which groups do you think would oppose it? And finally, what beliefs and ideas relating to manifest destiny do Americans still hold today? So think about these and discuss these. And our next lesson will be on Native American policy. We'll see you then.